friends, it's Teresa and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about 5 of the best and 5 of the worst books I have read so far in 2025. I'm going to go in no particular order, but I am going to alternate between good and bad, just so I can keep you all on your toes. But if you guys like these kind of videos from me, let me know in the comments down below. I do try to upload once a week here and then a couple shorts, hopefully I get back again, interspersed throughout the week. And if you want to let me know what books you have read that you have absolutely loved or absolutely despised, let me know in the comments down below. And then hit subscribe so you don't miss anything, like, comment, all the fun stuff, and let's get into it. So like I said, no particular order, and I'm going to be alternating between good and bad. So the first book is one of the first books I read in 2025. So there's the first book that I read in 2025, or one of the first books I read in 2025, and that is The Deal by Elle Kennedy. This is a new adult romance novel set in college. Follows Hannah Wells as she's trying to get back in the dating game. She has a crush on the football player, like the main football player of the college she's at, and they share a class together, but he just doesn't seem to really notice she's there. Enter Graham, who is the college's like one of the top hockey players and obviously really good friends with the football because sports tend to sport. Yeah. And he is failing their shared class, which I think was philosophy. Graham takes this as an opportunity to propose a deal to Hannah. He will tutor her on how to flirt, on how to get with his buddy, and she will help him pass this class so that way he can continue playing for the winter season, or continue playing throughout the season. Obviously things ensue, feelings get feelinged, and they start a romantic relationship. It's not too much of a spoiler, but it's obviously there. One of the best books I've read this year. I can't believe I've been holding off on reading it for so long because I really enjoyed this one. These characters were so much fun, and it felt like something that would really happen in college. Like, obviously there's some outlandishness to it. There's the fact that Graham's dad is kind of a psycho, and all the things like there were definitely certain scenes, but I think it felt very organic with how they came about. Their like proposal, while again a little outlandish for actual reality, felt like it was something very much would happen in their reality, and it worked really well. I found their romance to be quite organic. I found their banter to be quite organic, and I just would really genuinely follow an entire series just following Hannah and Graham. Like, I would love nothing more than to read an entire series following just these two characters. They were just that good to me, and nothing after. Like, I love the books and the characters after this book, but they never really hit the same way that Ashley and Graham really hit. Something about their chemistry was just very palpable throughout the page, and I just had a lot of fun reading about them. Moving on to the next, which is a Christmas novel, which I hate to say, but that is Kiss Her Once for Me, or Kiss Her Once by Alison Cochrane. This is an adult romance following a girl, a woman who has a beautiful one-night stand and has a wonderful like one-day relationship with this other woman. Something happens and the girl, whose name I'm forgetting, Ellie, decides to end up upping and leave in the middle of like bright and early that morning. Now she's just recently been laid off her job. I believe she is struggling to figure out what the next steps are, and her landlord, her landlord, who is a man, offers a proposal where they fake date and fake be engaged so that way that he can get his money or something like that, and then he will help her kind of fund her and help her get a job. Once they get to the cabin where his family spends Christmas, Ellie learns that her fake fiance's fake boyfriend sister was her mystery girl from all those nights ago. Things ensue. Now, the big thing for me is that this book just felt too much and then not enough at the same time. The characters were just like too crazy for me, and not in a good way. It felt like the author was trying to make really hard to make really quirky and cute characters that force us to root for them, and then when it came down to it, I never wanted to root for these characters. I'm also just not a fan of pseudo cheating or any form of cheating. I know that they're fake dating, and like, yeah, that's fine, but the fact that there were so many conversations between Ellie and the love interest being like, you're gonna be marrying my brother, and Ellie's like drunkenly telling her she loves her. I was just like icked out by the whole situation. Like, I truly did not need to have this scenario play out. It's just not fun for me to have to sit there and read through and be like, oh yeah, for the nth time in the span of 2 chapters, we are gonna have them argue once again about how Ellie loves her, but she is marrying her brother. And there was never a conversation between the brother and Ellie to say like, hey, I need to tell her, like she should keep this a secret, I need to tell her, and it just never happened. On the other side of that, if my love interest, if I gave out this huge sweeping declaration of love in front of people, which she should not have done in front of a soft opening of the girls' like coffee shop or whatever, but if I were to do this and then get rejected, and as I'm walking away, wallowing in my misery, as one does, and my love interest drives up and goes on the bridge that we met and fell in love on, drives up and goes, yeah, that was kind of embarrassing, wasn't it? I would throw myself off the bridge. That wasn't cute or quirky to me. It just felt like they were kicking the character down, kicking the character when she was already way, way, way down. And like I said, the characters just felt like they were trying too hard to be quirky and clever and cute, so that way you had to pick them and had to put them together because of their quirkiness and how cute they are. But it was just like, bleh. The next one is Wings of Starlight by Alison Saft. This is a YA, I wouldn't say retelling, but kind of like an origin story of Queen Clarion before she becomes Queen of Pixie Hollow. There is kind of like something attacking the people of Pixie Hollow, and she's trying to figure out what that is and what's happening. In order to do that, she has to talk to the Lord of the Winter, who has been since separated from the land of Pixie Hollow and his winterdom. The two of them have to work together, and obviously if you've ever seen Secret of the Wings, then you know that they fall in love and it does not end well. I love this book. I feel like it was just the right amount of nostalgia for me. It felt very organic to see how Clarion was before she became a queen, all the bumps and bruises that she gained along the way, and just how she became this like more put together queen and the sacrifices she had to make. I think that it was just the right amount of nostalgia to reel me in and keep me reading, but also added a little bit more layer to the world that I know and love and the characters that I know and love, that it felt like reading a whole new book. And that was just very fun for me. It's Pixie Hollow. You can't really go wrong. The next one is There's No Way I Die First by Lisa Springer. This is a YA thriller following Noelle, who knows horror. She is a big horror fanatic. She runs a horror podcast and is hoping to kind of bring up her viewership and, you know, be more of an influencer in her high school years. So she goes out of her way and makes like a horror watching themed party, invites all the big influencers of her class because they're all super richy rich kids that are influencers. So she's hoping that this will gain enough traction. And as the night continues, bodies start to drop. And she learns that one of the attendees was not actually invited in the beginning and is now slowly murdering or quickly murdering each of these students, all of her friends. And it seems like that the blame will eventually be put on her because she's the one who threw the party, you know, very like scream party situation. So she has to figure out who is killing them and stop them before he can kill them and completely ruin the night. I had a lot of high hopes for this book. It was, to me, giving a little bit, like I said, Scream, a little bit of, like, since we were kind of uncovering everyone's secrets, a little bit of Pretty Little Liars. But there was just a lot happening in this book that I feel like it probably would better translate in its, like, level of audacityness, sure that's a word, as a movie rather than a book. Stay with me here. There was just like a lot, like the characters themselves were super rich and super privileged, and that was something that was never really touched on. And when it was touched on, it was kind of brought up in a way that felt almost like ridicule. Like it was like, oh, the bad guy's saying it, so it's not something I should take seriously kind of situation. And I feel like there are just a lot of things that happened. Like I read it in an audiobook, and it wasn't that it was hard to follow, but it was just at some point I started confusing who was who, just because the personalities never really stood out to me. They all felt very much the same kind of character with very little bite. And I tried to get a little meta with having Noelle try to be like, I am not going to die tonight. I'm going to be a final girl. This is what final girls do. And then proceeded to do things that were definitely not what a final girl would do. I think the premise was solid. The premise had a lot to go with it, but I feel like the execution was just a little weak. And at the end of the book, the only memorable thing, truly, and this sounds crazy, about this book to me was when the killer opened up one of her Birkin bags and then shit in it. The next one is a sequel to a duology, and that is His Mortal Demise by Vanessa Lee. If you guys don't know, The Last Blood Carver, the first book in the duology, was actually one of, I think, my top books of some year. I think it was 2024. But this is a direct sequel to that, so I'm going to explain the first book to avoid some spoilers. But this follows Nika, who is a blood carver. To her knowledge, she's the last blood carver of her people, because most of them have been eventually like kind of like hunted out, like almost like brutally murdered and out of existence. She is the last one, and she's kind of living in the slums of this place. When she is caught, she ends up making a deal with one of the richer families in this town to help figure out a murder and a kind of murder that will eventually free her. But the more she uncovers what's going on, and that she uncovers more about herself and her powers, she's learning that there's a chance she might not be able to make it out of this ordeal alive. It follows a direct sequel, I think like a year or so after. This was just very heartbreaking. It was a lot of like trying to figure out what happened between the end of the first book and where we are in the second book, while also moving the plot forward toward the end of the novel. I found these characters to just be really like, I don't want to say fun, but they're a tragedy to be in, and I love watching them kind of get back to one another and really just like learn that they have each other in this world, and the family and the camaraderie that they kind of built around it was very heartbreaking to me. I just love reading Nika. I just love reading about Nika. Easily one of my favorite characters. I love the world building and the magic system in this world. I could talk about it forever and ever, but I highly recommend the duology if you have not read it yet. It's just a lot of fun, and like I said, I could read on and on with this series. The next one that I did not like is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. Now, before I get into my thoughts, I dislike the book for how it's written and not the contents of this book. My thoughts on why I dislike it will solely be on just how the author wrote the biography, and not the very important topic of toxic and abusive queer relationships. Just making that very clear for everyone. Very clear. But this follows, well, it's not doesn't follow. This is an autobiography of Carmen Maria Machado's first queer relationship, I think, that became very, very toxic for her very, very fast. Kind of details like all the things she went through, how she's processing and everything. And I wanted to love it. I have heard such amazing things about this memoir, not biography, that I was going into it with a lot of high hopes. I really enjoyed Her Body and Other Parts, which was an anthology book that she did. And while the topic, like I said, is very important, and I want more books to talk about toxic and abusive queer relationships, because sometimes I feel like we place, like, it's not a straight relationship, so it's like heaven on earth and nothing goes wrong. I think this is very important, but how she wrote it, to me, makes this largely inaccessible to the public that she's probably trying to reach. There were a lot of like drawn out metaphors and over-described emotions, and I understood the reason for writing this in second person. Truly I do. There's supposed to be like a form of detachment and separation from her personal experiences and her trauma. She's writing about her personal experiences, obviously doesn't want to trigger herself trying to relive everything. However, this made for a very detached reading experience. I feel like having that separation from the reader and the author was very prominent, and at the end of the day, I found it I felt nothing. Even in the most horrifying moments of this book, and I read it through the audiobook, I felt genuinely nothing. Like, there were a lot of drawn out metaphors and a lot of over-described situations, and it just felt like she was trying to elevate her words, like her prose, to convey the horrificness of this when it didn't need to be. It was like she was trying to write fiction in a non-fiction novel, and it showed, and it, like I said, it made it very inaccessible. I feel like it makes it very inaccessible for a larger audience, unless you are someone who loves very flowery and very purple prose in your nonfiction. Very inaccessible, which I don't think should ever be the case of a nonfiction book talking about an important topic, such as abusive and toxic relationships, both in the heterosexual or the queer spaces. But that's just my 2 cents. The next book is Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is one of the best books I've ever read of 2025. Period, end sentence, stop. But this is a prequel novel set between Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes and the first Hunger Games book. This follows Hamish Abernathy's perspective as he is pulled for the 50th Hunger Games, which is the second quarter quell, where there were about double of the amount of kids that were pulled that year. We see his humble beginnings to his very tragic downfall. I found Hamish to be a tragic character from beginning to end. There was never a moment where I was reading about his before the reaping life and just knew where he ended up and how heartbreaking it was that he ended up where he did. I love seeing all the characters that we did get to see and their involvement and just the overall messaging of the book. I know that the book is a little... The hands are heavy here. The hands are bricks with the messaging in this book, but I completely understand why Suzanne went a little heavy-handed, and not just because this is a book meant for younger, like teenagers, but because of the current political and social climate that we are in. Things have to be done a little heavy-handed because the system has failed many of us, a lot of us. But I love this book. I love seeing, like I said, all the characters. I love seeing Hamish from beginning to end. And it was just so hard falling in love with these characters because you know exactly what happens to them. It's not like the Hunger Games book where you're reading each book in succession and hoping maybe they'll change the rules or they'll be able to escape and people will be able to survive. You know that most of these characters, save for like one of them, like in this group that's pulled and thrown into the Hunger Games, will not make it out. And that just made it an even more tragedy to read because you're watching as Hamish learns this fact as well. He's on the side of hoping, like we were when we first read the books, that maybe someone will survive, maybe they'll find a way to end the games. And you watch him realize that that is not the case. There will only be one person who will walk out of this arena alive, and that was the biggest tragedy of it all. The next one is actually a set of 3 books, and that is the Playing for Keeps books by Becca Mack. I read the first 3. I was going to try to read the 4th book because I thought the 3rd book was going to redeem the series for me, and it just went downhill. So starting with the first book, which is Consider Me. This follows Carter Beckett, who is the NHL's like resident bad boy. He sleeps around no matter what happens, blah, 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 blah. Olivia, on the other hand, is best friends with Carter's teammate's girlfriend, and she's a high school teacher. She loves to play hockey. She's played it when she was younger, but when she runs into him at a party of their mutual friends, Carter falls almost head over heels for her, and she wants nothing to do with him at all. And so it begins of Carter's like attempt at wooing, and Olivia's just not into the idea. I had a lot of high hopes for this book. I really enjoyed Carter and Olivia in the first book. I thought that their banter was very fun, very nice, and I liked the progression of their romance. It felt very organic. I don't, again, like a pseudo-cheating scenario, or even like not cheating but made to think that someone cheated scandal or plot point. It's just drawn out and old for me, and I'm kind of tired of the cheating thing. Like, it's just like not for me. However, the subsequent books were not as great as the first book, which really dampened my memory of the first book. And the only way I can explain it is that it reads like a One Direction fanfiction, stay with me, where in the beginning the fanfic writer had set it up that the 5 boys, pretty sure there are actually 5 boys in this series, so that the 5 boys in this series have their own set stereotypes and personalities. And as you read the book, the fanfic, it devolves really quickly. Like, you realize that the fanfic writer never really knew how to write a bad boy, or like the mystery man, or the homebody, or whatever. And it just devolved, and they started talking and acting like how I would expect college at the oldest, college level kids, or at the youngest, even high school level kids to talk. They stopped acting like they were supposed to be top NHL players, and it felt like they were supposed to be playing at the collegiate or the high school level still. And it just kind of like ruined the reading experience, because these characters follow you throughout the books. They're no longer the main focus, but you still see them. And to see their characters devolve so much and almost become not even like a shell, just like an a completely different version of themselves, just didn't really vibe with me. And by the end of the third book, I was like, okay, well, maybe it'll get better. And then something happened and it didn't. And for some reason in each book there was almost always like some weird girl hate. So I was just like, I see we are following beats of an idea that never really planned out, and I couldn't do it anymore. I stopped reading I couldn't read the fourth book. I was like, this is just gonna be bad. It's just gonna be bad. The second to last book is the last great book, and the second to last book in this video is Before the Devil Breaks You by Libba Bray. This is a YA paranormal horror. The first book of this being The Diviners, then we have Lair of Dreams, and then the fourth book that I'm currently listening to right now is King of Crows. This follows Evie O'Neill as she is kicked out of her family home in Ohio and is sent to live with her Uncle Will in New York. The reason why she was kicked out is because she has this ability to be able to read objects. Like, say if I gave her my ring or something, she'd be able to read what happened, or what happened while I was wearing this ring, either from the day or further back, and that kind of caused a bit of a scandal. Now in New York, these very gruesome bodies are turning up after having been brutally murdered, and the cops can't seem to pinpoint what's going on. So Evie and her uncle end up kind of joining forces with the police and using her abilities to figure out exactly what is happening to these people and how to stop it. This is the third book in the series, the second to last book, the penultimate book if you want to use bigger words. This third book was so heartbreaking. Like, it definitely was setting up for what's going to happen in the fourth book and the last book, but this book was just so heartbreaking. Like, the characters were in so many ways falling apart and falling away from each other, and you just wanted to pause the book and try to like glue them all back together and hope for the best. Like I said, it's a lot of setup, but really good setup. I never felt like I was getting like intentionally set up for the finale of the quartet. It felt like she was building to it, and it really meshed well with the pace of the book and everything. And I think I listened to an audiobook. I listen to a lot of books in audiobook at work, and I came very close to tears with what happened in this book. So I highly recommend the series if you haven't read it yet. I'm almost done with the fourth book. So, and the last book, or I guess novella, is Same Time Next Year by Tessa Bailey. This follows Britta, yes, like the filter but with an extra T, who is a waitress working at a bar. She wants to own this place, but she kind of just is short on the money. And it's become the regular hangout of what is called the Bridgeport Bandits, a local band, a local hockey team, sorry. Her half-brother's on the team, so she has a strict no dating policy. However, Sumner, who is, I think, one of the players, I didn't say his position, is from Canada and is on the brink of being deported because, you know, visas and such. So they come up with a weird plan. It's very much like that one with Sandy Bullock and Ryan Reynolds that I'm forgetting, where they get fake married, go through the visa process, and after a year or two, or like I think a year and a half, they break up, and he gets to keep his visa because he married, he's a citizen now, and she gets money because he's going to pay her to do so. High hopes for this. It was a novella, so it's very short, and I know that in novellas, you know, you gotta pick and choose what to develop on and what not to, and Tessa Bailey just happened to say, I'm not gonna do anything. I felt like the characters had no chemistry. A lot of the things that we see are like through time skips, which feel like it made me lose out on a lot of the development that I wanted. They had no banter, there was nothing, and the plot was like there, and then it stopped being there. Like, there was no threat of like the government trying to break them up and like do the whole thing. And the last thing that got me about this book, the final nail in the coffin about this novella, was when Sumner likened her orgasm to the washing machine on the spin cycle. I don't know. If someone was having that reaction to climaxing, I would probably end up having to call 911 because I would think they were having a seizure. Truly, come close. Come here. I'm gonna come to you. I demand that authors and editors stop trying to make things more magical than they need to be. You can just say she climaxed. I didn't need the whole spin cycle metaphor because most of y'all's metaphors don't hit. If this is an indication of how I'm gonna feel about future Tessa Bailey books, I probably will have to put Tessa Bailey on hold on my TBR so I can recover from this scenario. But that is it from the books, worst and best books that I have read so far this year. Sorry, I ended up on crummy note. You know, in my brain it made sense to start with the best book, but then I realized that I would end up with end the video with the worst book. So, but if you like this kind of video, like I said, comments down below. If you want to see more from me, let me know, and then I'll see you guys in my next video. Stay safe. Bye.